Hi everyone, I'm Rob Schmidt with another edition of Financial Planning 101 where I show you how to make money and save money by explaining some complicated financial matters in a way that anyone can understand. And I'm going to explain to you why the government should not get involved in forcing the lenders to renegotiate with the roughly 6 million foreclosures. You see, the president, when he talks about these unscrupulous lending practices, he's leaving a lot of information out, starting with the fact that once the client filled out a loan application, within 3 business days, we were legally required by government regulation to send the client a good faith estimate, which included all the costs, all the terms and conditions of the loan. And I can assure you, I got a lot of calls from clients asking questions when that happened. After the loan is submitted and it's gotten approval, the lender has to do the same thing. So those are 2 times when the client gets they get tons of paperwork with full disclosure. This idea of unscrupulous lending practices, right now the one that's being unscrupulous is Barack Obama. Also, I sat in on the close of escrow before, and in close of escrow, before the client signs the official loan documents, the escrow agent goes over those loan documents in great detail, and the client has every right, they have every right to ask questions, and they're not being forced to sign it. Having said that, once they do sign it, these loans are then bundled up and they're put into bundles and they are sold to investors, typically on Wall Street. Roughly about 80% of those investors end up being insurance companies, and let's face it, if the insurance companies don't get their return on investment, what happens? They raise our rates. But the rest of the investors also, don't they deserve to get their money? I mean, if you invest in something, don't you expect to have that investment honored? And this idea that the government's going to force B of A to send rebate checks, don't these people have an obligation to honor the loans? I mean, I left the loan business in 2001. I didn't apply for any loans. I had nothing to do with it. Neither did, many of the millions of Americans who are having trouble finding a job. I think it's worth mentioning also, there was a lady who said, once her hours at work were cut, she had a choice between paying her mortgage or feeding her kids. Now that I've told you about, all the disclosure that happens, you know that she knew what she was getting. I'm sorry, but if it's that tight, she was not in a position, she could not afford the home loan in the first place. And this is where it gets nasty, but the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. I mean, I think it's terrible to see that lady lose her house, but as a result, in part of the 6 million foreclosures by people like that, there's 30 plus million Americans who have unemployed, in large part because this situation with the foreclosures is such a mess. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Every time the government gets involved with this, it makes it that much harder for the banks to hire people like myself. And yes, I've interviewed with the banks, and every time the government gets involved, the interview process comes to a standstill. Now, if you still think that the government should get involved with this, please explain to me why you feel that way. Now that I've shown that there's full disclosure, please explain that to me. Share your thoughts with me in the YouTube message center. And for the people that like the video, I'd love to hear from you as well. And in the meantime, may God be with you in 2012.